Great. Thanks again, Jed, for coming, and thanks again, everybody, for coming. So, great. Let's get into it, and then go from there. Feel free to interrupt me at any point in time if I start using some crazy jargon or some crazy acronyms, and then we'll go from there. So, we're going to give an update of the spatial decision support system and collaborative community, and have a little discussion about it. So first off, I just wanted to start with some of the latest news and then get into it. So we've had a bit of a site overhaul in the last month and a half or so. Heather's done a lot of great work on that. Heather was not able to join us today because there's a really exciting talk on agile communities that she wanted to join in on, so she'll be watching this later. And Randall, who's also usually a mainstay, he is out in the field with his new organization, Nature Conservancy Canada. The other exciting news is that Janice and I have been in discussions recently about potential for TWS to host the collaboratory in the long term. And so, as you can imagine, that's going to require a several-month dialogue about the details and the themes of the dialogue. I think two of them we could hit on in today's discussion, which is what is the scope of the collaboratory and what tools will the collaboratory need? And so that's what we'll be getting into as far as the discussion. Also, I want to give you an update on the actual publication for the SDSS. I have begun work on the revision as requested by Conservation Biology, and also a revision of the SDSS itself. So I'm plugging in a few extra things to make it version 2.0. Also, other important news that's not on here but that's on the site is that the Islands Trust team has already finished version 1.0, and that's on their site, on their space that you can get to in the collaborative area. And then also, as Tom alluded, he's making some exciting progress in moving forward with the Sonoma work as well. Now, as far as the publication, it kind of interacts with our timelines and our discussion. So I just wanted to give you an update on that. I'm hoping to submit it by middle of March, and it's going to require that update of the software, as I mentioned. I'm calling it software loosely for everybody in the room, but basically it's the GIS toolbox. So some people might argue the semantics of that being software, but it does the same thing as software, and we can get into that later. Hopefully, most likely the journal is going to require some revisions, and hopefully they can tell me that quickly and I can turn that around, and hopefully they'll approve it by September. That's kind of an optimistic timeline. It could be as far as 2012 before it actually gets published. So, so I think what we want to do is just kind of think about different phases of releases of the collaboratory and of the decision support system. So phase one is kind of what we're in right now. It's going to, the next presentation that's planned is for the International Association of Landscape Ecology in April. And also, we'll be doing outreach to direct collaborators. There's a possibility we can do something for the Biodiversity Planning Forum. A lot of that will depend on Andrew Brown's interest and availability. He was planning on making today's call, but I think he had to, he wasn't able to make it for the last minute. Phase 2 release, I think, would be when we're presenting at Society for Conservation GIS and the ESRI User Conference, and then phase 3 would be after it's actually published. And phase 3 is when we'll actually start getting a lot more traffic onto the site and really be able to achieve the vision. So it's going to be a ways out until we get to move into that area. So as far as the scope of the collaboratory, as far as that question, what is this collaboratory? How much is it going to include? For instance, Christina was asking me, well, at what level and when and how is it going to be including marine conservation planning? And and then for the TWS discussion, it's like, well, is it going to focus primarily on public lands, or is it going to be all lands? So that kind of geographic scope, but also, are we going to just focus it mainly on the GIS analysts and be a collaboratory for just the GIS analysts, or is it more the whole project team? Like in Pete's case, you have maybe 10 different scientists from different organizations that are involved in the project team. Would they have a space on this collaboratory? And those are kind of the issues of what is the scope. And so to flesh that out, I kind of want to give a reminder to people and actually some new slides here on the overview of the vision. The final slide of this sequence kind of tries to summarize the whole, well, as much of the vision as possible in one picture. So here is the start of it, and so here's an overview of the spatial decision support system, and the collaboratory will be the following slides. So real quick, we've seen this before, so I'm not going to go into very much detail here, but the spatial decision support system is a computer-based system that incorporates data, scientific principles, and human values to provide these maps and tables that are useful in making these decisions that the decision makers use in conjunction with a whole bunch of other things to make their wise decisions. And usually there is a GIS analyst or a team of GIS analysts that are instrumental in designing the spatial decision support system, making sure all the data, principles, and human values are flowing into it accordingly and out of it accordingly. And so now there are GIS analysts working on a variety of different spatial decision support systems, of course, and oftentimes they can join a community practice, be it within the same organization or even cross organizations. So they'll call each other and have email conversation about how do you do this, how do you do that, and they'll send each other latest updates of the model. And so the idea of the collaboratory is that you can still do that old-fashioned communication, but also you can have a web repository where you're having all your communications that anybody else in the collaboratory can also see the communications and the data uploads. And you know, someone else working on an SPSS that hasn't even met the people can still glean their knowledge and share their knowledge. Glean the knowledge from the other people and share their knowledge. And of course, this scales up dramatically. This is just the start of it, but you can have hundreds more people all sharing ideas and knowledge in this collaboratory. And they're all each affiliated with their own spatial decision support system, which has its own set of stakeholders and science advisors and decisions. And you know, there's varying amount of overlap in the topics of the SPSS. So, so here's the slide that kind of summarizes it all. The lady in red details a little bit more of her spatial decision support system. Oh, and I added an extra icon in the fact that the key thing in the SPSS is to transparently show how the human values, scientific principles, and data are being combined to create these maps and tables and figures and useful things for making these important decisions. So that is that's the quick overview, and then so today's discussion is on this collaboratory. You know, some of the other webinars that we've had in the past have been over in this section over here about the decision support system and how to deal with normalization and you know, dealing with integrating these principles and values and data. But today we're talking about here the collaboratory itself, and that's the ongoing discussion here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to provide a straw man here for a proposed scope of the collaboratory, and then over the months we can change and modify this straw man. The proposed scope is that the collaboratory is open to all efforts that are developing and or implementing a model or toolbox or software that is a member of the Landscape DSS family. So what's the Landscape DSS family? So just kind of looking at the model and looking at some of the other models that we're developing in the collaboratory and trying to see, okay, what are some of the characteristics of this? And this is the slide that's going to change, and we'll eventually make a wiki page of this. But it seems to me that the similar characteristic is that it uses multi-criteria decision analysis. So, so for some of you that might not be familiar with that, that's like the idea of if you're going to try and figure out what lands you want to conserve, well, you could look at, well, what lands are really important to biodiversity, what lands are really important to recreation, what lands are really important to the economy. And so each one of those three things are different criteria. And then it's hierarchical oftentimes. And so biodiversity can have a whole suite of different criteria that feed into it, and same with the others. And in in the current, in one of the toolboxes, the one I've been developing, you can actually identify weights between those two, between the criteria at any particular level, and combine them. So there's quite a whole science behind multi-criteria decision analysis, and in some papers, people even consider things such as Marxan and C-plan multi-criteria analyses because they do have multiple criteria. So, you know, what specific types of MCDA are we going to be including, and also what about some of the more simple MCDA, like Bo's work? Bo Wilmer in TWS has some work in the Rockies in which he looked at individual criteria, but rather than doing a weighted sum, he just did a filtering approach. So the question was, what areas are we going to target for forest restoration? And then the criteria were, well, is it ponderosa pine? Yes or no. If it's a yes, then it's still a candidate. If no, then it's not a candidate. And he did that for a sequence of 5 other things in a binary approach. And I still think that that should be part of the landscape ESS family. Another criteria, I think, would be that it's open access. You know, really one of the principles of Web 2.0 is that we need to really share our models and tools. And it's not completely open access in the fact that you need to pay for a license to use the toolbox. So we're assuming you have an Esri license. But, you know, we're also going to welcome other open access GIS software if they want to apply and be part of the family. I think that we should keep it limited to conservation, restoration, and/or stewardship, not just any old decision support system for the landscape, such as where are we going to put the next Costco or Target. I think we want to say that it uses return on investment framework, which in essence is really a cost-benefit framework. So in other words, in figuring out which areas you want to conserve, you look at what are the benefits of conserving certain areas, but also what are the costs of conserving those areas. And I think that it should be an optional characteristic that you use continuous benefit functions for representation and not simply target. But that's a fine-tuning detail that we should discuss, as well as I think it's optional for the family, including models that do and do not use heuristics for pursuing optimal solution sets. So that's like trying to figure out the best set of sites that, taken as a whole, are going to best meet your biodiversity and social and economic needs. I think some tools don't do that, but I think they should still be part of the family. So yeah, so some unresolved questions about this family is what about models that develop a particular criteria, and should we support them? Should they be part of the collaboratory? And my inclination is that yes, such as the Soundscape model that was developed by Sarah Reed and Jen Boggs and others here at TWS a couple years ago, on that could actually become a criteria in the decision support system, and that's saying, okay, well, what areas are most affected by the noise of these roads out in the wilderness and semi-wild areas. Randall's working on an iteration of the human footprint model, which is similar to what Pete has as some input data, and so is that supported? I was browsing some TNC sites, and they really are quite wide open in their breadth of what goes on their site. But as you know, TNC is really quite broad. You know, they're including marine now as part of their programmatic goals. So their collaboratory, which is we link to from our site, which is a collaboratory for posting documents and posting models, not necessarily working on models together, includes pretty much the entire scope. So we need to kind of get a discussion about that, and also what kind of extent and support should we provide. Should this just be focused on the people that are developing the models and implementing them, or should it be developed on focused as support as well for the stakeholder and scientific advisor teams for these people, for these different implementations. And I go both ways on that. So let's take a break here, and I mean,